welcome to Tanakh Talk. I'm your host, William Hall, broadcasting live from Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Rabbi Tovia Singer's Let's Get Biblical Q&A, coming to you from the Holy Land. Rabbi Tovia Singer, welcome back. How are you, sir? Oh.
Doing terrific. Thank you.
Excellent. Very good. Very good to have you back. And I think we have our phones are all set up nice and tight, so we are good to go for you callers out there. Just be sure when you do call in, be sure to don't hang up. Sometimes you might have to sit for 20, 30 minutes or so on hold, and if you hang up, you're going to lose your place.
Let me translate that. If the rabbi gets really long-winded and goes in all kinds of circles, so we might just be stuck here, because for some reason his is the flagship show. We can't dump him with the whole Tanakh Talk tanks.
We would sink.
But the guy goes on and on and on. So if that happens, whatever. I hope you paid your electric bill. So thank you. I'm just translating that.
Hey, you did good. You did real good. Well, once again, it's good to have you back here, Rabbi. So
it's always a pleasure.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. All right. Well, I guess what we can do is, if you're interested in having a show today, we'll just have to have a show today.
All right.
I haven't had my coffee yet, so my brain is giving me an attitude right now.
That can make a difference for you.
All right. Good deal. All right. So we will go ahead. What's that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. All right. We'll take this caller. Caller, welcome to the show. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
This is Francis Perone in now Auburn, Alabama. Rabbi Tovia knew me from Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. My Jewish name is Ephraim bin Abraham. Hashem promised David that there will always be one of his descendants on the throne of Israel, but that doesn't seem to have been the case for quite a long time. So I'd like to know what's happened there, how to explain. Thank you.
Interesting. Very good. Okay. All right, Rabbi. That seemed pretty clear. I heard somebody say sometime once that was actually proof that Jesus was the Messiah. It's interesting. Take it away.
Wow, that's very, very interesting. That's correct. Let's unpack all of that. Okay. Great question of why there hasn't been a king since Tzidkiyahu, Zedekiah. That means 2,500 years since the end of the First Temple period. Zerubbabel served only as a governor in the beginning of the First Temple period. So as it turned, now this can get amped up for a moment. Missionaries do amp this up, as William said. And the argument, Christians, goes, we have a king, we have a priest, we have a sacrifice, and that's Jesus. But you, Jews, where is your king? Where is, and moreover, it is promised in Genesis chapter 49, verse 10, that the scepter will not depart from Judah, a lawgiver from between his feet until Shiloh comes. That is a blessing that Jacob gives Judah. It's the most elaborate of all the blessings that Jacob bestows on any of his sons. And that means that Shiloh here means the Messiah. And it means that the scepter will not depart from Judah until the Messiah. Okay? So the question is, what happened? So the answer is in Tanakh, and it's all over the place. The promise is, look carefully at the Davidic covenant in 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12 through 16. Look carefully at Genesis 49, verse 10. The promise is that that once the kingship is given to the descendants of King David, it will never depart the way it did from your predecessor Saul. It does not mean that there would always be a king. Moreover, Hosea chapter 3, verse 4 and 5, explicitly, as clear as could be, says that the children of Israel will abide for many days without a king, without a prince, without a sacrifice, until afterwards the children of Israel return and seek the Lord their God and David their king, and that's the Messiah, and they will feel the Lord and his goodness in the Achris Hayom, in the latter days. Again, that's Hosea 3, 4, and 5. So that's the Tanakh is telling us that whenever there will be a legitimate king over the children of Israel, it'll be from the house of David and Solomon. And it will never go to another tribe, it will never depart. But it does not mean that there will never be a period, an epoch, where there will not be a king. And the Christians run into problems here on multiple fronts, because according to I know this is beyond the scope of the question, but this addresses what I hear all the time and William raised. According to Christians, Jesus was king, whatever, he was king, sacrifice. But there was no king during the Second Temple period. So even during the period from the destruction of the First Temple until Jesus, that's a solid 500 years, the church admits there was no king. So the argument completely collapses, it completely implodes. It becomes crystalline, it becomes clear that the promise is that whenever there would be a legitimate king blessed by God, it would be from the house of David, and it would never be torn away from David's descendants. And if you look at 2 Samuel 7, 12 through 16, you don't have to look. I normally say if you look carefully, you don't have to look carefully. You can do just a survey, just quickly read it. The text explicitly says that if any of his descendants, if your son sins, I will punish him personally with the rod of men, but I will never take away the kingship as I did from your house as I did to your predecessor. So we see very frequently that King David had children and that made mistakes, that sinned, all sorts of kings. But the line was preserved. But the text does not mean that at all times there would be a king, and it does not mean there would never be a king prior to King David who was not from the house of David. Look carefully at the text in Genesis 49, verse 10. This comes up as a question as well. It says that the scepter, it's an unusual term, scepter means kingship, will not depart from Judah. That means once it's in Judah's hands, it will never leave Judah, meaning King David. It will never go to another tribe. So what happened before King David is, well, once it's in King David's line, it will never depart. And God really kept his promise. And I say really, I added in the modifier because God had good reason to allow Syria and the northern kingdom to defeat Ahaz, Hezekiah's father. He was a very wicked king. The case could be made that he was the worst Davidic king in history. God had an IOU note to fulfill with Ahaz as an example. And that IOU note was fulfilled in a very, very famous chapter. The Christians made it very famous, and that's Isaiah 7. That was very reluctant. And if I ask most people, how was Pekah and Ritzin, the kings of the northern kingdom and Syria, how was their battle foiled? How were they destroyed? Most people wouldn't know. It's in 2 Kings, but most people wouldn't even know where to find. They were murdered. There was an assassination. So Christians have to ask the question, answer this question, that until the Mashiach comes, the children of Israel will abide for many years, a very long time, without a king, without a sacrifice. So I asked the Christian, please tell me, pray tell, when was this period? It's been drilled into your head that you have a king, Jesus. You have a sacrifice, Jesus. You have a prince, Jesus. This is all Hebrews. I don't need to tell you this. Hebrews 4, 5, 6. It's all over the place. So what does the Bible mean? That until the Mashiach comes, there won't be a king. What does that mean? This is a nuclear bomb for the church. How do you possibly answer that? So that's the reason there's no Davidic king. We don't have the reason is really, I don't want to overwhelm the audience, but when there's no prophets, and the prophecy ended with the three prophets of Zechariah, Malachi, and Haggai, not in that order. So when it ended, so then you couldn't have a king, because the role of the prophet was to advise the king and to guide him. Anyways, that was a great question. Thank you very, very much. And it's great to hear from you.
Awesome. That was good answers. All right, we'll move on to the next caller. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hi, this is Van.
Van, welcome.
Cincinnati, Ohio. Going back again to Daniel 9, verses 24 to 27,
okay.
Some well-trod ground. The sequence of events, my understanding, is that the Messiah is supposed to be rejected and the temple destroyed. The temple has been destroyed, so there don't seem to be a whole lot of alternatives for who the Messiah was. It's been said that if Jesus wasn't the Messiah, the Jews don't have a Messiah. So, it seems pretty clear that there's only one choice for the Messiah. And how do we get around saying Jesus is him?
That's a great question.
Well, yeah, I just want you to stay there for 1 second. First of all, thank you for calling in. So, I think I got your question. But I want to make sure. You're saying that Daniel 9 says that the Messiah will be rejected.
Right.
Is that right?
Right. Rejected, cut off, something or other.
All right. And
then the temple
what's the therefore? So the Messiah is cut off, rejected, and therefore? I just want to understand your question.
Well, and then the temple is destroyed.
Right.
The temple's already for the prophecy to be correct. I mean, it's a two-step process. The Messiah is rejected, and then the temple is destroyed. Well, the temple has been destroyed, so if the prophecy is going to be correct, then the first step has to have been carried out already. The Messiah was rejected, and Christ was rejected according to the New Testament. So if the temple was destroyed and the first step has already been done as well, then that seems to point to Jesus as the Messiah.
So let me, if I may, just keep you on for a second, because I want to just tease this out before I address it. So Daniel, we are told in the book of Daniel, Gabriel, the angel, is speaking here, that there are 6 things that are to happen to coincide with an anointed one cut off, with the destruction of the temple. You're right, the temple is destroyed. That's absolutely correct. And those 6 things include the termination of transgression, the end of sin. Now, from what I could see, sin has not only not been ended, but it's doing amazingly well. Satan is right on his game. Transgression is not terminated. So how do you, that means why didn't Jesus do that?
I don't know the list of 6 things you're talking about.
Obviously, those are 2 of the 6. So those are 2 big ones. Like sin comes to an end, right? This must sound familiar to you. right?
Well,
Because you
does
knew
it
all that
say?
other, right? So what do you do with those other? That sin has to come to an end. Transgression has to be terminated. Jesus didn't accomplish that. People are sinning today is more than ever.
Right.
Okay, I just wanted to give you something to think about, but I appreciate you calling in. I really appreciate you calling in.
You can go ahead and hang
All
up
right?
now and tune in for the rest of the
Thank you.
answer, okay? Appreciate that. Okay. Rabbit's all yours.
I say that because I want people to really look at the text. I want people to really just drink the text, absorb the text. Just let it fill you. It's really quite beautiful. So let's really unpack this. So we're talking about Daniel 9 and the last 24, 25, 26, and 27, last four passages. So what's happening for the caller, I have a lot of respect for him for having the courage to call in, is that he's using a Christian Bible. Why would that make a difference? Wow. So it makes an enormous difference. And I want to unpack this. The word Mashiach appears in the Hebrew. Mashiach means Messiah, or Christ is just the Greek. So that word Mashiach appears in the Jewish scriptures 39 times. In the Hebrew, it's there. It's easy to count. Now, as it turns out, what Christian Bibles do is that in not all Christian Bibles, there are many Christian Bibles that are honest here. The Revised Standard Version, the New Revised Standard Version. But it's the same suspects that come up over and over and over again who just jam the text. And what they do is in 37 places where the word Mashiach appears, it's a Hebrew word, they translate it correctly as anointed, right? But only here in Daniel 9 verses in these texts we're talking about, it translates the word Mashiach as not only Messiah, they amp it up even more. They then put a capital letter, so it's capital M Messiah. Open your King James Bible. I mean, if you have one, if you're in Borough Park, Brooklyn, you probably don't have a King James, but then just take my word for it. What they do is they translate the same word that's translated in Leviticus 5 and in Habakkuk 3:13. It's translated as anointed. Same word here is Messiah. It gets crazier. And then they capitalize it, even though there's no such thing as a capital letter in the Hebrew language. So that's a complete theological translation. It has nothing to do with the text. And then it gets crazier, and they put in the definite article. So that comes nutty. If you look at the King James in Daniel 9, verse 24, says the Messiah, the Prince. But the word in Hebrew, there's no word there, there's no definite article. This is a HaMashiach. So this is a scam. And that's why good, honest, decent Christians read this text in a New International Version and are convinced that this is talking about Jesus, and are convinced that the Jewish people are blind, utterly blind, that there's a veil over their eyes, and Paul was right in 2 Corinthians 3 and 4. There are scales over their eyes. They can't see. They can't see what is so obvious. That's what's going on. You notice there's something very interesting that's going on is that Christians, I think the nice Christians who have a favorable view of the Jews. I don't want to talk about, bad. I'm talking about nice Christians who have favorable view of Jewish people are astonished that Jews can't see the obvious. It's their book, their language, and they're clever people. They have quite a reputation. How could they not see that Daniel 9 is talking about the Messiah? It says it right here in my King James. I'm not kidding. This is how many Christians feel. They really just don't understand why a people so wise, so smart, it's their Bible, they can read it, I can't read it, but they don't realize that the problem is that they can't read in the original. Jews, conversely, look at Christians, I'm talking Jews who have a favorable view of Christians. Jews go, I can't believe, like, this Christian's like a perfectly normal, intelligent person, but believes in Jesus. Like, how could you not see that Daniel 9 has been so manipulated by the church that it's not even you can't even recognize what the original text says if you're reading through the Christological filter of the Christian translator. That's what's happening here. And it's sort of like the Jew and the Christian are just passing each other by and going, not saying anything if they're, and just going, each one is saying, why don't you believe the way I do? What's wrong with you? Why can't you see it? The difference is that not Christians are not bad people. The difference is they have no access to the original. Because what the Christians' Bibles, this goes beyond the questioner, so I don't want to go further on this, but I will tell you that the Christian Bibles need to eliminate the two anointed ones discussed in these four passages from verse 24 to 27. There's one who's an anointed prince, a Mashiach Nogid in the text, in the Hebrew. And he gives the command to rebuild Jerusalem, who comes after 7 weeks. That's just 49 years. In Daniel's counting, or in the end of the book of Daniel, days are years. So a week is 7 years. Why? Beyond the scope of the show, but it is. So from the going forth of the word, that means from the destruction of the first temple, until we have a king who's a Mashiach, an anointed one, who gives the command for the Jews to go build Jerusalem, build the temple, it's 7 weeks. 7 weeks is 49 years. That means on the 50th year. Well, think about it, my friends. From the destruction of the first temple, something happened 50 years later. A Mashiach rose up and said, Jews, go back to Jerusalem, rebuild it. Go build your temple. Who is that? Cyrus. How do you know? It says it. Where? Isaiah 45 verse 1. It's really 44:28. That's the end of the chapter. And then 45 verse 1, the beginning of the next chapter. Forget the chapter break. It literally says just what I said. And crazy. I'll let you guess without looking it up. Do you think in Isaiah 45 verse 1, where you have the word Mashiach, that Koresh, which is Cyrus, is my Messiah, do you think the King James Bible is consistent and translates it there as Messiah, capital M, or do they translate it as anointed? Think, based on what I've told you, just take a guess. The New American Standard, take a guess. The New International, what I'm doing is I'm going through all the suspects, the usual suspects. We're doing a lineup, criminal suspects. The answer is, you know the answer. You don't have to look. They render it correctly, same exact word. In Isaiah 45:1, Mashiach is translated as anointed by these Christian translators. And here in Daniel chapter 9, they translate as the Messiah. Well, where did you get that from? Why'd you do that to me? You should go right back to your Christian bookstore and say, I want a refund. This book purports to be a translation. It's not. This is a human, this is a crime scene. This is a fabrication. This is a complete twisting of the text. Right? This is fraud. This is not just like, whoops. This is very well calculated. Now, let's figure out what's going on here. There are two anointed ones here in Daniel 9. One that comes after 7 weeks, meaning 49 years. That's Cyrus. He's different than the second one because this first one is a Mashiach Nogid. Nogid means a prince. And a second one who comes after a subsequent 62 weeks, which is 434 years. You know what the Christian Bibles do? They conflate. I don't want to go far here. I have a whole chapter on this with all the chronology in volume 1, but they conflate it that the Messiah comes after 7 weeks and 62 weeks. No, it's after 7 weeks. And then that's why look at the next verse, verse 26. And after the 62 weeks, doesn't say after the 69 weeks. It says all crazy, but I don't want to lose you here. So let's go back to this. The anointed one who is cut off after, in verse 26, after 62 weeks. 62, it doesn't say 69 or 70, 62. Who is that? That's the priest. You know that the word Mashiach, or anointed one, is used, as I mentioned, 39 times in Tanakh. It's never referring to the Mashiach. It's referring to a whole range of people. What they all have in common is they have a leadership position, but the word is used most frequently about a priest who's the descendant of Aaron. What happens during the war between Rome and the Jewish people in the year 66? Why is this important? Because Daniel then sharpens in, and it is revealed that in the last week, for half the week, after half the week, an anointed will be cut off. What is the anointed one? Doesn't say the Messiah. It means the priesthood would be cut off, the high priest out. I'm a priest, but I can't bring sacrifices. I'm eligible to bring sacrifices based on my genealogy, my family. Please God, the Mashiach will come very soon, and I'll be in the Beis HaMikdash, in the temple, bring offerings. But I can't. In fact, the only thing a priest can do today is really fulfill the negative commandments, the things that we're not allowed to do. I'm not allowed to go near a dead body, so I can't do that, but I can't bring sacrifice. So the priesthood, meaning all the 130 commandments associated with sacrifices alone in the Torah, those are not going on today. Now it's true that the temple is destroyed, and he's right on that, and I wanted to bring out a point, because according to Christian tradition, Jesus was killed in the year 30 or 33. Why there's a difference is not important. Let's say he was crucified in 30. So they're saying that's the Messiah, the Messiah cut off. But the temple isn't destroyed then. In fact, the temple is not destroyed for more than 5 weeks of years, meaning 40 years. So it doesn't even work. I mean, Jesus is killed in the year 30. The temple isn't destroyed. The temple goes on for another 40 years. In fact, church fathers were hard-pressed to explain why the temple would continue to stand after Jesus' death. Because from the Pauline theology and what we find in Hebrews, there's no reason for a temple to continue at all. It should have been destroyed. That is what should have happened in the estimation of Christian thinkers, all of them. They held that it was James the Just who was so righteous that the temple remained standing for him. And then when he was killed, so then it could be destroyed. I don't want to go far here. So what's happening is they have the last week before the temple's destroyed, all right? Think about that. So from 63 to 70, the second temple was destroyed in 70. Half the week, we're going to the last passages of Daniel 9. What's half of the week? What's half of 7 years? 3.5 years. What happens 3.5 years before 70? The Jews go to war with Rome. What's the result? Temple's destroyed. The priesthood is cut off. The whole ecclesiastical role and function of the high priest is completely terminated. It's exactly what happens. This has nothing to do. Now, what happens when the temple is destroyed, this gets a little, if you get this, you're going to go very high. It's really quite delicious. As soon as the temple is destroyed, it's like on a gun, the gun is cocked, which means the kinetic energy, the potential energy, is suddenly launched. Mashiach now can come. Bear in mind, if one of the roles of the Messianic age, the coming of the Messiah, is the building of a temple, see Ezekiel 37, the last 3 passages. See Ezekiel 40 through 48. If one of the things the Messiah is to do when he comes is to bring about the rebuilding of the final Messianic temple, it's explicitly in Tanakh, and the restoration of the sacrificial system, Hosea 3, 4, and 5, and so on, then the Messiah would not be coming when the temple's standing. He would be coming to an epoch in time when the temple is destroyed. Therefore, Jesus is not even qualified to be the Messiah. He came at the wrong time. I hope you're getting this. And, when I broadcast, I'm always fearful that I'm going to just go too far. I want to pour in as much information to you as possible. It's like a mother who wants, before sending her children off, she wants to give them as much food as possible. I want to give you the food as possible. So the answer is that the Mashiach in Daniel 9 is like the Mashiach, that Hebrew word, in all other parts of Tanakh. It's an anointed one. It's not the Messiah, as the King James Bible says. And you have to ask the question, why does my NIV translate it as the Mashiach only here? And where do they get the definite article in the capital letter from? And that's where everybody gets into trouble. And that's why I asked you the question, because Daniel's telling us the following things, that once the temple is destroyed, the Mashiach now can come. Each generation, the subsequent generation, the Messiah now can come and launch those 6 things, which include the termination of transgression, the end of sin, the wiping away of iniquity, everlasting righteousness, and the sealed the vision of the prophet, and the anointing of the most holy. So that means each generation, there is someone waiting who could be the Messiah for that generation, if the generation would deserve it, and meaning they fulfill Isaiah 59, verse 20 and 21, that a Redeemer will come to Zion, to those in Jacob who repent. So you have to go back to the Hebrew, understand what the Christian Bibles have done. And one thing, ask yourself, this whole deal that Daniel 9, the end of Daniel 9, provides a precise chronological time for when the Messiah is supposed to be killed. I need to ask you the question. I'm talking to the Christian now. Why didn't the authors of the New Testament think that was significant enough to mention? It's not mentioned anywhere in the New Testament. Nowhere in the New Testament says that Jesus was killed, was executed, was crucified to fulfill what it says in Daniel, that after 70 weeks, was anointed one, 483 years, an anointed one would be cut off. The answer is they never came up with that one. That's a 2nd century Christian invention. And then Christians proceeded to tweak, twist, corrupt the text in Daniel in its translation to comport with that twisted hermeneutic. And that's where we're left today. And that's why when you ask that basic question of, tell me, why didn't Jesus fulfill the thing that we would see today? Because it says there that what's ultimately going to happen is the Messiah is going to end sin, terminate transgression. Jesus didn't do that. Isn't it interesting that Jesus fulfilled everything that you could not tell? He came in Jerusalem on a donkey. How would I know? There's no way to tell. But if he had terminated sin, ended transgression, we'd sure know about it today. I have a good feeling that it hasn't happened yet. Why? Because Jesus is not the Messiah. Thank you very much for that thoughtful question.
Very good. Very good. I was just looking over that verse as you were talking, and something I never saw before. It's still there. It says he will be cut off completely. It says and he will be no more. I mean, just that part alone, he will be no more. So how is it that if Jesus is resurrected and he is alive, then that means he doesn't fit this specification either, which is really weird. So
the words are ve'ein lo. It's ve'ein lo.
Gotcha.
He'll have nothing, which means that the role of the priesthood will just come to an end. Yikares Mashiach doesn't really mean killed. It means remove, cut off. Kares means to be cut off. It's not the word that would be.
I see.
We use. There are other words that would be used. But anyways, there is. Well done, William.
All right, very good.
Let's
Okay.
move on.
Okay. Caller, you're live on the air. Welcome to the Knock Talk. Did we still your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Steve from Brooklyn. Hello,
Steve,
everybody.
how are you, brother?
You?
It's been a minute.
Okay, great. Happy Purim to you all. All right. So the rabbi mentioned that Daniel 9 was a crime scene. So I'm going to go on that same theme and propose that the author of Matthew was either schizophrenic, freebasing on cocaine, nose candy, or was completely did this on purpose. So Matthew 23 says that the scribes and the Pharisees sit in Moses' seat. All therefore whatsoever they bid you observe, that observe and do, but do not ye after their works. For they say and do not, and then they say they put on heavy burdens and grievous to be borne, really bad stuff. They put on their phylacteries, they widen their garments, really bad stuff.
Yeah.
The question is,
flamethrower. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's beyond it. It's like a nuclear bomb. It's basically like,
Right.
the Jews are horrible. Now, and not just the Jews, but the Pharisees. So the question is like this. Okay, so let's say the Pharisees are Satan, according to Christian theology. Why in the world? I mean, imagine if I tell you, Adolf Hitler or Pol Pot or Pinochet, they sit in the seat of Moses, okay? Now, whatever they tell you to do, but don't act like them. Why would I want to act like that? Why would I even want to do anything of them? If they are evil and horrible human beings, whatever they say should be garbage, right? Like Paul. Follow Paul. Don't do the Torah. Don't do the mitzvahs because it's Pharisaic Judaism. Jettison it. Throw it out. Run like anything. So make up your mind. Either they are the worst people on the planet and don't do as they do and don't listen to them, ignore them, or do as they do. And if they're the gold standard, then follow them. Make up your mind. I mean, seriously, that's my question. Was this done on purpose to mess up? That some frum guy, some religious guy put this in, and no one's looking to kind of confuse everybody, or this is just Matthew being sloppy, schizophrenic, or whatever. Anyway, that's my question. Does everyone get it?
I think so.
Very much.
Thank you so much.
Hey, thanks, Stephen. Talk to you
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye. All right. Bye-bye.
So this is a really good question. And as it turns out, the Jews are called the devil or the seed of the devil in John 8:44. They are given that great honor as well. So Steve is asking a brilliant question here. That means why does Matthew 23, it's not only Matthew 23, but throughout the Christian Bible, the information that Jews are conveying, not all Jews, but just the Pharisees, scribes, essentially same thing, what they're conveying is from God. But they're really bad people. And Matthew 23 is a flamethrower. It's a bomb because it attacks the Pharisees as really, really bad people. But what they're saying is directly from God. Now, a hint of the answer is that Paul says the same thing in Romans 3, that the oracles of God were given through the Jews. The church is stuck between a rock and a hard place, because they're not claiming that Jesus is like the son of Zeus. They're claiming that Jesus is the Messiah, the fulfillment of the Jewish scriptures. Luke 24:44. They are claiming that it is the Jewish scriptures that are pointing to Jesus, and moreover, they're claiming that Jesus emerged from a Pharisaic background. Not only that, Jesus is saying in the Sermon on the Mount that the Pharisees, their observance represents the gold standard. And unless your righteousness exceeds that of the Pharisees and scribes, notice it doesn't say the Sadducees, you don't have a place in heaven. So they're stuck. You're right, because Christianity emerged as a heresy of Judaism, not as an independent Greek religion. There really were no independent Greek religions, but really the Greeks took ideas that were very, very well known in Persia, Babylon, North Africa, in the East, and just, just amped it up and made it Greek. But the idea is really not Greek. So what the church had, and this is not the only problem they would have, and that's why we as a old Jewish saying that to be a liar, you have to be very smart. Mark Twain kind of said the same thing, because you got to keep track of all your lies, and ultimately it just collapses. So the New Testament is stuck because they're saying that Paul was not just a Pharisee, but a Pharisee of Pharisees, and essentially the smartest boy in the class. And Paul admits it himself in Galatians 1 and 2 and Philippians 3. So you can then say that the Pharisees, what they taught was bad, because if you do, so then Christianity collapses, because the church's claim is that Christianity is the fulfillment of Judaism. All scripture is pointing to me. And the only people who know all scripture are the Pharisees. No one else does. They're saying that Jesus is the fulfillment of what the Pharisees are waiting for, not what the Hindus are waiting for. So therefore, the Christian Bible is very careful. I have a chapter on this in Volume 1, Let's Get Biblical, that the church is stuck with saying that the information that Jews are conveying is from God. The oracles were given to them. See Romans 3, 1 and 2, Matthew 23, 1, 2, 3. They are the standard for righteousness, Matthew 5, Sermon on the Mount, but they're hypocrites and vipers and very bad people. Now, why go so hard on them? I mean, why this amping up the hatred? Because the church has a problem, and the problem, I say the church, which means all followers of what would become Christianity, they have a huge problem. Is why don't the Jews believe this? This is not like the Eskimos don't believe in Jesus. The church is stuck with a problem. If it's so clear, it's so transparent, it's so unambiguous in the Jewish Bible that Jesus is the Messiah, then if anybody would know that, it would be the Jews. The Bible is written in a language that only the Jews read and recognize. The Jews are the ones who are waiting for the Messiah. The promises were given to them. And they have a reputation as being a smart people. So Christianity has this big iron ball on a chain stuck to their foot, and they have to overcome that. Unless you happen to be a Marcionite a second century Christian movement, a Gnostic Christian, another second century. So they actually dispensed with the Jewish Bible altogether. And the Marcionites were not crazy about the God of the Jews, although they considered the Jewish God to be a God, but he was inferior to the Christian God and the God of Paul. The Gnostic Christians, utterly, the Jewish God is nothing. So, but we're not dealing with those kinds of people. The Proto-Orthodox believe that the Jewish Bible is the Word of God. So how do you explain the Jewish unbelief? So you have two choices. You can either say that the Jews draw a different conclusion than we do. But you will never hear that from a Christian, never, unless a very liberal Christian. You'll never hear that. You can't say that the Jews look at the text and they just form a different opinion. Because, well, why do they form a different opinion? They would know. What does it make a difference what people in the sub-Sahara believe? They don't know anything. The Jews know. It's their book. The prophets all, they came from them. Isaiah through Malachi, these were all Jews. There wasn't a Puerto Rican among them. What's going on here? So therefore, what I'm telling you, if you put that together, what you produce is the Christian Bible, saying that the information the Jews are passing on is correct, but the Jews are just totally blind. They're worse. They're the seed of the devil. They're enemies of Christ. That's John 8. Don't mix up John 8. Many scholars, New Testament scholars, just mix up John 8. I don't know why, but they think that the Jews who are called the seed of the devil are Jews who believe in Jesus. I've heard top-tier Christian scholars say that, and it's wrong. You have to look very carefully at the text, John 8 specifically, John 8, 30 and 31. There are some Jews who believe in Jesus, but what Jesus goes off on are the Jews who don't believe that and say that Jesus has a spirit of a Samaritan and so on. So that's a mistake. So that you have to say the Jews are the devil, that the Jews are so evil that they are responsible, they're culpable for all the innocent deaths in history, from the death of Abel, the son of Adam, to Zechariah, the son of Berechiah. A big mistake, but it's in this same Matthew chapter 23. So Christianity emerges from a Jewish crucible. It's a heresy of Judaism, and it's a real nasty one. So it's because it holds that Pharisaic Judaism was the truth, but the Jews were blinded, because you can't say the Jews just draw a different conclusion, because if the Jews are just good people like everybody else and they're not demonic, they're not devilish, then why don't they believe in it? So you have to come up with the Jews are horrible people, scheming people. And you see that in the Passion narratives, in the same Matthew, that when the Roman soldiers who were put by the tomb, it's a story only found in Matthew's Passion narratives, and the body's gone, the Jewish leaders are willing to bribe Roman soldiers to say they fell asleep. What does that mean? People read that and just go, what? That is so intense, because that means the Jewish elders, the Jewish leaders knew that Jesus was the Christ, but denied him anyway. And you have to be the devil to do that. I mean, why didn't they go, oh, really? His Bible is God? All right, I guess I'm going to be a Christian then. They didn't. I got to tell you this crazy thing that's happened to me a few times in my life. It was very striking. Before the whole COVID thing started, so I walked through Jerusalem. I was walking on Jaffa Road, and people recognized me, and I could see out of the corner of my eye. So I'm speaking to a couple that recognized me. They were asking me questions, and who remembers that? They took a selfie, whatever it was. And there were other people who recognized me, and they were kind of waiting very politely to speak to me. I was at by the Ben Yehuda area of Jaffa Road. And I could see from the corner of my eye, there were two fellows standing there. They had tzitzis, fringes hanging down the sides of their trousers, but they didn't have a kippah on. You know, you can always tell that's like a giveaway, that they're somehow with the Messianics. They were very polite. They waited till everyone else asked me a question. And then they sat down. Their wives were there, but they went around shopping. And they sat down with me. And they were being like so polite with me, asking me questions. Very polite. If I tell you, they were and they were very awestruck that they were talking to me. They were very excited about it. In the end, one of the fellows said to me, I kind of remember he's originally from Mexico, South America. He was very cordial. And he was asking me questions in a very nice way. But at the end of it, he asked me, if you knew that Jesus was the Messiah, would you accept him? When he said that, I nearly fell off my chair. And the other guy is just watching this. And I couldn't even wrap my brain around what he is. And I said, let me make sure I understand you right. You're asking me if I knew Jesus was the Messiah, would I accept him? Like, of course I will. Like, why wouldn't I? Like, it means I was so blown away by that question. Because what is he asking? That means in his mind, this is a nice guy, I think. I mean, I can't do mind reading, but these Christians who are nice people are so brainwashed that they actually would think that if I just believed that Jesus was the Messiah, I still wouldn't believe in him, just like the Pharisees of the New Testament. I mean, of course, if I thought Christianity was true, I could be in the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in 20 minutes. That's how far I live. I'd be in church in a second. I mean, what's the question? But now, to any outsider, if you took someone who just, someone who believes in Zen Buddhism from the East, doesn't know anything, they would go, well, what do you mean? Like, why would you ask the rabbi that question? That means that is a real question from a Christian viewpoint. The Jews are really capable of denying Christ, even though they know he is the Messiah. And as I kept asking about, what do you mean? Like, why wouldn't I believe in Jesus? He was kind of embarrassed. It seemed that he was becoming a little flush because I was pressing him. I wanted him to figure out not how offensive, it really is offensive, but how in saying that question is like, why wouldn't I be a Christian? And of course, it would be very embarrassing for him because he would have to then say, in order for his question to make any sense at all, that, oh yeah, based on my training as a Christian, Jews are fully capable of knowing that Christ is the Messiah, but deny him anyway. But only the devil would do that. Got it? And I finally got that through to him. And it was a shocking thing. Now, that happened a couple of other times in my life. But understand that this person, I presume, was a normal, seemed to be an intelligent person. And he came off as like very thoughtful, and he was certainly very respectful to me. But that's what Christianity can do to a nice person. It could take completely sane, moral people who are completely sane in any other aspect of their life, completely moral in any other way of their life, and make them ask questions that are completely insane. That he would never ask that of any other person. He would never ask that of someone from, I don't know, from Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, he would never ask that. Of course, if he knew Jesus was the Messiah, he would believe Christian. But that's possible because you've been thoroughly brainwashed. Your view of the Jew is so completely shaped by these dark texts. And this is why the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, an early 20th century product, forgery, fake of the Tsar, the secret police of the Tsar, was possible that Christians, Orthodox Christians, could believe that. Because it's Christian, the Jews control the world. Thank you for your question.
Okay, very good. We got time for another one, Rabbi?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. All right. Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Hey, Rabbi Tovia and William, this is Nicholas Jacobowski again.
Hey, Nicholas, welcome back.
Hey, thank you. So I hope I come off as a regular person, but I believe that the Jewish people come to the conclusion that, Jesus was, or they just come to a different conclusion. But I have a different question that's unrelated to the New Testament, if that's okay.
Sure, go ahead.
What is that okay, Rabbi?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, can you kind of explain to me what the difference between Yirat Shemayim compared to Yirat Hashem, so the fear of heaven, and can you kind of give me examples from the Torah or the Tanakh? So the fear of heaven compared to fear of God? If I can ask that, I don't know. Yeah, go ahead.
Just ask you, where did this question come from?
Oh, yeah, I was reading an article from the American Jewish University.
Mm-hmm.
And it was explaining some things to me about the fear of heaven and how it is different than the fear of God, or how it might relate.
Let me ask you a different question.
That's fine. You don't even have to answer it.
No. I'm trying to make. Where does the term in Tanakh, fear of heaven, come from? It's an idiom, but
yeah.
Where is that? Where would you find that?
I think
so. All right. So let me just say this to you. Thank you for your question.
Go ahead, Nicholas. You can hang up now, okay?
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Okay. Bye-bye.
Yeah. So there is an idiom, a Yirah Shemayim, a fear of heaven. It certainly is. But the Torah warns us you should fear the Lord your God. Of course. They are, in essence, that idiom and the commandments to fear HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they are conveying the same thing. Because heaven, in this case, doesn't mean the sky or clouds or anything like that. But it means that heaven is Hashem's dwelling place. And that heaven is connected to earth. The most ecstatic vision in the Torah is the dream that Jacob had, where he saw the link between heaven and earth, connected by a ladder. God is on the top of the ladder. And that's an extraordinary, an exemplary dream, because they're connected. Joseph's dream, conversely, is one of earth, or meaning you have piles of wheat, or you have stars and the moon and sun. They're not connected. everyone around Joseph realized there was a problem with his dreams. So a person who fears heaven recognizes that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, guides the world, that it's all connected, and that in fact, if any transgression occurs here on earth, it does damage to that connection. So that's what a Yireh Shamayim conveys. A Yireh Shamayim, one who fears heaven, is they're not really different. It's a subtlety, but a fear of heaven means, first of all, the term fear doesn't mean fear as, oh, I'm afraid, but it means in awe and recognizing that that's the source of all things, recognize that God guides the world, that God is he's the Bashefer, he's the creator, and he guides everything in the world. That's what those two terms, how they imply, how they convey a little differently. The difference is really not really significant. Anyways, thank you for your question.
Okay, very good. All right. We still do have a little bit more time, Rabbi, if you're interested.
All right.
Okay, good.
Sure.
Okay. Actually, the caller that was on just hung up. I'm going to give you a question that I just got in through text message from Patricia. She's watching right now. The question is basically, when did the Sadducees, if you want to, Sadducees didn't believe in the oral Torah, is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. When did the Sadducees eventually fade away? And then, because I mean, from what I've learned from you and from others, before about 250 years ago, there was just Judaism. There wasn't the different sects of Judaism. It was all just everybody believed the same, which means they embraced the oral Torah as well. So there must have been a big gap in between when the Sadducees like vanished or faded away, if you will, to the time that they stopped believing in the oral Torah again, which was several hundred years ago. So actually, we've got a call coming in now. Think about that for a minute. If we have time, we'll come back to that, okay? Caller, you're live on the air. Please tell us your name, where you're calling from.
Yeah, this is Michael Perdue from Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
Michael, welcome back.
I have a question concerning David as the Messiah. I'm wondering, why wouldn't David himself be the Messiah in the end in the Messianic age? Ezekiel 37 says that, my servant David will be their shepherd, their prince. When the resurrection of the dead happens, David is he's the greatest king of all Israel, that Israel's ever had. Everything's kind of centered around him. Why wouldn't he be the final king and prince?
I want to say this to you. I want to keep him on if I can.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, stay on the phone with us for a minute.
Michael, I want to tell you this. First of all, I like you. I don't know you, but I like you. You're a smart man. I like your question. Thank you for calling. And it's a good question. And actually, there is an opinion in the Talmud that, in fact, that David will return as Mashiach. There is such a view. It's a very thoughtful question. It's not the consensus, for sure, but it is. It's a really good question. Anyways, thank you very much for calling in.
Okay. Go ahead and hang up now.
Okay.
Answer.
Thank you.
Thank you. So he's asking a good question because in Tanakh, the Messiah is given a name. It's not Yeshua, not Jesus, not Christ, none of those. It's David. It's called David. And so Michael asking a very good question that the resurrection of the dead takes place in the Messianic age. What would preclude David resurrecting the dead and then being the Messiah? So it's not the consensus for a number of reasons, but it's an interesting thought for sure. It's clear that, to me, that because there are hundreds of people, remember, in every generation, from the destruction of the second temple, Remember, from the destruction of the Second Temple, the prophecy in Daniel 9 is launched. Those 6 things now can happen. And every generation, he can come. And if the generation would deserve it, Isaiah 59, 20, and 21. So that means there's someone has to be standing by to be the Messiah. What do these people have in common? Well, they have a character in common that we would find in Isaiah 11, 1, and particularly 2 and 3, 11, 2 and 3. This is a great, great person. And it has to be a great, great grandson of King David. But that's why he's called the branch. The Messiah is one of many people, just like a tree has hundreds. I don't know how many branches there are in an oak tree. Whatever it is, it's so many. So there's always somebody standing by, an adult. A baby can't rule, so there's always somebody waiting. Now, what happens if the generation doesn't deserve it? That person passes away. And then another person who's from the house of David, from that lineage, is ready to stand by and to step forward. So therefore, calling the Messiah David would make a lot of sense, because that person is a fulfillment of the Davidic covenant, the promise that God made to King David. In many places in Tanakh, famously 2 Samuel chapter 7, verse 12 through 16. I'm inclined to say that that's the way it's going to be for many reasons, including we see that the Messiah, who's a prince, that he'll have a family, children. And in Ezekiel, at the end of Ezekiel is sorting out for us where all the tribes, remember the tribes are restored in the Messianic age. We see that from the get-go. We see it a lot of places, but in Ezekiel 37, the 2 sticks that the prophet puts in his hand, one Ephraim and his companions, and Judah and his companions, they become one. The return of the northern kingdom that were lost. So therefore, the presence of Mashiach and the presence of the Messianic temple means the presence, the restoration of the northern kingdom, fulfilling Hosea chapter 2. So where does everybody go? So the allotment is different. That means where all the tribes are is in a different location, sort of broad stripes across the country. That's another issue. But the Mashiach himself is given his family is given a parcel of land, and where his kids get it. Look, if you look it up, it's in Ezekiel 46, I think 16, 17, 18. So that wouldn't seem to jive well with King David returning, but that's an opinion, and it's possible, and we'll know when it happens. So thank you very much for calling in. That's really nice. I enjoyed that.
Okay. Dad said he'd be right back. So.
Do we have you there, William?
Can you hear me?
Sure. What's on your mind?
I don't know.
Oh, wait. What's your social security number? I'm kidding. So I understand. You are not any person, but you must be somebody who has a special role, and that is to guard the show. Is that right?
Yeah.
Right? And your job is to make sure that everything flows well.
I guess.
And you're going, kind of. And I'm going, I understand. I understand completely. I understand that Texas is getting warmer again, and you're done with the storm. Is that right?
Yep.
That was pretty nasty.
Yep.
That was really cold. All right. So we're going to wait for the leader of the free world to come back. You know what I'll do? I'll answer the other question. So let me answer the other question of that was asked me, and that is the Sadducees. Whatever happened to them? So the Sadducees were one of...
Okay, hang on just a second, Rabbi. I'm back. Hang on. David did a good job. All right,
David was
one
perfect.
second. Yeah, that was pretty
In
cool.
fact, there is a rumble going on that David should replace you. I'm trying to
that
keep
would not
your job,
surprise me.
but there
Oh,
was
my.
talk, whispers, murmurs going on about that.
That's hilarious. Okay, so to be fair, let me read the question to you because I want to make sure I got it right. One thing that she said was that she heard that the Sadducees were actually were the priesthood, not the Pharisees. I didn't know that, but that's ingrained in the question here. Hang on. Okay, let's see. All right, I've got it here now. All right, question is, when did they stop believing in the oral Torah? If it was given at Sinai, everyone should have accepted it and known it. My understanding is that the priesthood were part of the Sadducees, trying to figure out when this stopped being important to them, since they were responsible for keeping and teaching Torah.
Okay, and then you added another question. So let me unpack that because
Okay.
that's going to confuse a lot of people.
Okay, please.
And I want to unconfuse people. That's my job.
Perfect. Thanks.
Okay.
Okay.
So the movement of Sadducees, called Sadukim, named after Tzadok, basically started, say, a couple of centuries before the destruction of the Second Temple. And they're called the Tzedukim, who did not believe in the oral Torah. They didn't believe in life after death. They essentially, that movement ended after the destruction of the Second Temple. I mean, we basically don't hear about them anymore. They're gone. Now, there's a little mistake here. It's not that all the priests were Sadducees, or all the Sadducees were priests, none of that. But there is something where it's being misconstrued that way. And that is that Sadukim, the Sadducees, were cooperated with the Romans. I'm being very gentle by not using strong words like colluded, but they really were working for the empire, with the empire, and were responsible for the goings on in the temple. It's not that there were no Pharisees who were priests who were working in the temple. It just meant that they dominated or had an undue influence in the goings on in the temple. That's all it means. There were Pharisees who were priests who worked in the temple, for sure. But the Romans wanted to work with them. They were assimilated Jews who adopted alien ideas and had jettisoned fundamental beliefs of Judaism. So they were a real heresy of the Jewish people that caused us an enormous amount of problems. And they had a dominant or a large influence over the goings on in the temple. They surely did not control the temple. There were many Pharisees, and we are told on numerous occasions about fights that broke out in the temple over different beliefs because they rejected the oral Torah. Rejecting the oral Torah was a way of saying that we reject the authority of the sages. That's really what it was about. But because the Sadducees were so rolled up with Rome and with the temple, their importance would disappear once the temple was destroyed. The temple was also an important place for the empire, because that's where the Sadducees were largely responsible for collecting taxes and protecting the taxes collected in the temple. Like, where did the money go? When money was collected from people living in the land of Israel, like, where'd you put it? Until the Romans got it, until the Romans showed up with their big treasure chest and said, okay, put the money. Like, where did you keep it? It was actually kept in the temple. This was a practice not just for the Jews, it was a practice for the empire. That's why banks are built with the architectural design of a Greco-Roman temple. You notice that, like the big pillars and so on? Because in the ancient world, it was the temple. It could have been a temple that was designed as a temple to Apollo or to any of the Greco-Roman gods, to Jupiter, to Mars. But they had that kind of design, that Greco-Roman design. That's why and that's where the money was kept, because they thought that would be the one place that people would be least likely to violate, to transgress against. And the Sadducees were entrusted by the Romans, and they were in cahoots with the Romans. But once the Romans destroyed the temple, they were unemployed, out of a job. There was another heresy that emerged in the kind of the 8th century, and that was the Karaites, Hanan ben David, that would emerge later to reject the oral Torah. Usually these fights occur because of a political battle that emerges. And if you really don't like the rabbis, what you then say is that the rabbis are teaching is not from God. Even the Christians didn't do that. The Christians taught that what the rabbis were teaching was from God. The rabbis didn't keep it, but what salvation is of the Jews. The Jews had it. The Christians didn't do that, but the Sadducees did. It was a very personal battle. Anyways, thank you for that question.
All right, Rabbi. Well, that was a great show. A lot of good questions out there, for sure.
That's right. I'm very proud of the audience.
Absolutely.
A lot of great questions. And to the Christian who called in toward the beginning, I'm very proud of you that you had the courage to do that. Really, it means a lot to me that you did that.
Indeed.
So thank you very, very much for your calling in. Shalom. And we'll see you next week.
Okay, sounds good, Rabbi. Thank you so much for everything. We'll see you again. See you later, guys. Make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel and click the like button if you enjoyed this video. Really appreciate that. Y'all have a great week. See you later, Rabbi.